Okay, so for those of you who were watching on video, we've already actually started our study, so we've already prayed. We're having a discussion about a presentation that was made last Sabbath, what the date of that is, 15th of June, the 15th of June in Arkansas. At Lambert Fellowship there was a presentation that was given called Two Streams, and in the closing moments of that presentation a short statement was made about something that's really already affecting the movement and is going to continue to. So I began discussing that subject by making the statement that a number of key speakers spoke about historical setting or dispensations, and normally when we think about dispensations we think about large eras of time, like the Christian dispensation or the dispensation of ancient Israel, but we can also think about dispensations in much smaller pockets of time. So if we were just to think about our own reform line, I would suggest we're already in the third dispensation of our reform line. If you think about an agricultural cycle, I think all of you, if you have watched presentations over the last 12 to 18 months, should be very familiar with that we use an agricultural cycle to break up or divide the reform line into four time periods. Time of preparation or ploughing, a former rain, a latter rain, and a harvest. So if you're familiar with that, you can understand those four time periods as four dispensations. And we're currently in the third of those four dispensations. We're in the time period of the latter rain. If you can conceptualize that, maybe I should draw it. If this is the ploughing, and this is the former rain, and this is the latter rain, then this would be harvest. So that you get a reference point of where this is coming from. If you were to turn to Revelation 14, I'm not saying don't turn there, but if you were to turn to Revelation 14, and the first 5 verses deal with the 144,000, then verses 6, I normally say 6 to 11, but it's technically 6 to 12, some people go even to 6 to 13, deals with the 3 angels' messages. Then after that, there's a story that talks about the conclusion of what happens after the 3rd angel's message. And the reason why I'm saying not to particularly turn there is if you look at the 1850 chart here, it has the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd angel's messages. On the chart, they choose to have the 3rd angel's message go from 9 to 13. As I say, some people go to verse 11, which I would normally do because I want to make a point. Some people go to verse 12, which I guess is technically where the message ends, but they've gone to verse 13. And then there's this pictorial artwork here. And if you look at it, there are 4 beings that follow the 3 angels' messages. There are 3 angels, and there's Christ. So I'm not trying to do a study on this, but just to show you that in this last part of chapter 14, which is obviously connected with the 3 angels' messages, because it's a consequence of those messages, whether you pass or fail. You'll see in the hand of Christ, and you'll see in the hand of this angel a sickle. And that sickle, when you read the verse, it talks about reaping or harvesting the earth. So that's the reason why we would go to look at an agricultural model when it comes to a reform line, because the reform line is dealing with the everlasting gospel, and the everlasting gospel in the context of Revelation 14, which is given in verse 6 to 7, the 1st angel's message, its conclusion uses the imagery of harvest. So that's why we're using the agricultural cycle, so you can see the connection. So if you've got these 4 dispensations, we're currently in this dispensation here. if we just put some dates here, to make this the reform line of the priests. Sister Sue, what's this first waymark, the date? What's the date for the first waymark?
What's the what, sorry?
Date. Sorry, my this is not clear. For the line of the priest. If you're not sure, just say you're not sure, it's okay. Sister Lizanne?
I would say 1989.
So it's 1989. Sister Natalie, this one, the second waymark. Yes. I'll just put, sorry, 2000?
2001.
Okay, so I'll just put 9/11. I thought you were just combining the two there. So that's 9/11. Brother Carl, this one.
2014.
And Brother Richard, this one here.
2019.
2019. Brother Stephen, this one.
2029.
So I've given you 5 dates for the reform line of the priests. And we're currently in this reform line here. What we could now do is not use dates, but we'd use symbols. So I want to put symbols and overlay them onto those waymarks. So Brother Thomas, what waymark is this one? What's the title for it?
Parminder. What's the H?
Sorry?
What's the H?
Harvest. Brother Leo, what's the title for this one?
1A. The empowerment of the first angel.
I was wondering what you were going to put there. So you're going to put 1A. Sister Daisy, this one. Sunday law. Brother Jean Mark, this one.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to try and use symbology that's ones along this line.
Alright. Let me try.
Sorry?
Midnight cry.
Oh, midnight cry now. Do you have an idea?
Close of probation?
The close of probation. And this one, Brother Jean Mark.
Second promise.
Second advent. Does anybody have any questions on all of that? Relatively straightforward for most of us. Brother Dupre?
Yes.
Good. So, if we think about this line of information, what I'm suggesting is this dispensation here was the dispensation of time. This is when time was a test for this movement. And if we were to be candid between ourselves, Sister Emma, did the movement at large pass or fail that test?
Failed.
Okay, so Sister Emma says we failed this test. So when I say we, I'm just saying the movement at large. I would argue that the movement gave all the correct information at the correct time in the correct way. And if you want to be directed to studies that address that issue, you could go to a number of different places. The ones that I would recommend that you went to were the presentations done by Elder Jeff in the Arkansas camp meeting in March, I think it was this year.
This is Mike's.
Okay, I try to, if it's a short answer, then I turn it, otherwise I will. So, Elder Jeff did a series of presentations in Arkansas, I believe it's in March this year. You would be well advised to look at those presentations. And Sister Tess did a series of presentations beginning in Guadeloupe that addresses this issue. So she addresses this issue about the subject of time setting in this history from Guadeloupe, and in fact a number of different camp meetings since then. So if you wanted to delve into this subject at a deeper level, I would recommend that you go and watch those presentations. So I'm saying this is when time was a test to this movement. So everybody okay with that concept, that idea? Questions? Okay, so if you've been...
Question? No? Can we ask what time test it was? Was there a specific type of test?
Thomas, has got a microphone?
Yeah,
So she's not asking anything.
Okay.
Anything significant. I'll try and address the question.
You don't have to, just wondering if it's relevant.
So I think most of us know that in the Sunday law history, there's going to be a loud cry. Everybody should be aware of that. That would be Revelation 18, verse. Mr. Debbie? Don't look. Okay, there you can look. You don't know. Revelation 18. What's your answer?
I'll say 2.
No, not 2.
Sorry.
Not verse 2.
No, okay, hold on. Is it 4?
So it's Revelation 18, verse 4. It says, and I heard another voice. This other voice is not the voice of the angel of verse 1. It's a new voice, a new message. You okay with that, Brother Dubray?
Yes.
Yeah? Brother Rayon, which message is that? Message of verse 4.
Sorry, that's the passage.
Revelation 18, verse 4. What message is it? Does it have a number? First angel's message or something like that.
The third?
Sorry?
Is it the message of the third?
Okay, so Brother Rayon says that Revelation 18, verse 4 is the third angel's message. Brother Adelio, do you agree with that? Revelation 18, verse 4. Come out of her, my people. Is that the third angel's message?
Yes.
Brother Richard, do you agree with that? That's the third angel's message. Yes or no will do.
I can't remember.
You're not sure?
No.
In a car. Say yes. Okay. Brother Stephen. So my question was, is it the third angel's message? Could give me a yes or no answer. I'm not looking for explanations of why you believe what you believe. I just want to know where people's thinking is. You're not sure? Sister Emma.
Let's say it's both.
So both what?
Third and second. I think it's the third.
So you think it's the third. Sister Lizanne.
thinking it's not the second, but then I thought no, it's the third. I don't know.
So you're not sure? Sister Daisy?
I think it's the third.
Sorry, you think it's the third? Brother Tom?
I don't think it's the third.
I did say, what's that?
I don't think it's the third.
Okay, my question, is it the third? And you're saying no, it's not the third. Brother Leon?
The third.
Okay, so most people are gravitating to it being either the third angel's message or they don't know. So I guess only one person has said, no, it's not the third angel's message. Sorry? Someone said something?
I'm
Sorry?
in the no camp.
Are you in the no camp for sure?
Yeah.
Okay, so the correct answer is that it's not the third angel's message. So it's just another message. If you want to call it fourth. I guess if you say fourth, I'm not sure what sequencing you're using. It's not the third angel's message.
If you're not going to call it fourth, what do you put it under then? If you don't.
Well, why would you call it number 4? Based upon what numbering scheme?
Yeah, so I'm saying I wouldn't call it number 4. So if you're going to call it 1, 2, or 3, you have to call it 3, don't you? No.
This is the third angel's message. It's the same message as this one here. Revelation
Yeah.
14. That's what you think?
Yeah. No, it's the second.
It's the second.
I thought number 2 was the first 2 was the second angel's message.
The verses 1 to 3.
1 to 3.
Then you've got another voice. Okay, so I'm not going to go into a study of that anyway.
The empowerment of the third.
So I'm not going into study of that's what Brother Stephen said. It's the empowerment of the third. But it's not the third angel's message. So the only reason I mention that is I think most people, hopefully by now, would assent to this model. Sunday law, close of probation, and the loud cry. Okay with that. And some people might want to do it this way, with an escalating or a swelling voice. So is everybody familiar with this picture work here? So the loud cry is a separate message, separate waymark to the Sunday law. Yeah, if we're okay with that. So we already know that there's going to be a waymark in between these two. Ellen White tells us that information. It's not anything new that we've discovered. But what we have seen over the, I guess depending on who you asked and how well they explained it, that there's not just one waymark in this history. We're identifying clearly there to be 2 waymarks, 2 waymarks. And once you identify that these 2 waymarks, and you think about this story dispensationally, what you can see is that in each dispensation there are 2 waymarks. So if we went to this one here, the one that all of us are very familiar with, the story from 1989 to 9/11. So if we did that one, and we put the 2 waymarks here. We'll first go with the title of the waymarks. Brother Thomas, what's this waymark title?
First angel's message.
So what's this title?
Oh, sorry. Okay, empowerment of the first angel's message.
So what's this title?
Oh, sorry. I didn't see that.
Sorry?
Sorry, I didn't see the whole thing. Okay. No, I didn't see the, yeah. Didn't see.
Okay. Can we start again then?
Yeah, start again.
What's this waymark? No, sure. Brother Richard, go this way, Marcus.
Oh, okay.
Cheating. Sorry? Brother Carl?
Increase of knowledge?
So, this is the increase of knowledge. And Brother Richard, this one is?
Formulation of
this is the formalization, and then this is the empowerment, and this is
You're right.
Is everybody okay with that? Yeah? So we can put some dates on this.
Yeah.
Sister Lizanne, this one here, this date.
1996, sorry.
Good. I think someone already shouted it out, but brother, Sister Daisy? 1991. So we can mark internal and external events at each of these waymarks. At 1996, there are many external events that we're now identifying. So you can take this model, this dispensation, and we can then introduce it into every single one of these dispensations so they'll all follow the same pattern, they'll all look the same. Does that make sense? So what we can do is, we can have two waymarks in each one. This is the ploughing, the former rain, the latter rain, and harvest. So is everybody okay with that concept? So once you can do it for the line of the priests, you can then do it like for the line of the Levites, the Nethinims, of course the 144,000. Any questions, Sister Cedric? No, everything makes sense to everyone? Yeah? So if this is the increase of knowledge, and this is the formalization for this dispensation, yeah, Brother Dubray, what's this waymark here? Not the date, what's the title for this waymark?
2005.
The date. Not the date.
So what are you asking me?
The title. This one's increase of knowledge, this one's formalization, what's this one? Sister Emma.
Increase of knowledge.
So this is the increase of knowledge. Brother Dubray, this one is formalization. Brother Thomas, this one is? Okay, so everybody gets the idea now.
Is that new?
Ish. New-ish.
Oh,
Okay, so all we're doing is taking these dispensations and identifying there will be waymarks in those dispensations, and in this line of study, identifying that each of those two waymarks serves the same characteristics or the same purpose in each of those dispensations. So from 911 to 2014, there were two waymarks, and those two waymarks serve as the increase of knowledge and the formalization on that subject that's being dealt with in that dispensation. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay, so this would be open to interpretation, I guess, to some degree, because people see things differently. But this dispensation here, dispensation 1, the ploughing, what would be the theme here? There's a piece of knowledge on something, there's a formalization on that same thing. It was first introduced or arrived, so it arrived, there's an increase of knowledge on it, it's formalized, and then it's empowered. What is the it? Sister Lizanne, what is the it? What's the
In
story?
the first,
In this first one, what's the story? What would be the it?
history repeats. Line
History
upon line,
repeat. You said
Line upon line.
line upon line. Is everybody okay with it, or do you want to express it a different way? Yeah? So we'll call it line upon line. This is the dispensation of line upon line. So it's not a new thought, but perhaps we haven't thought about it in that way. Because we've said line upon line goes all the way through. Okay, but now I'm just looking at our line slightly differently. So if we can see that that's the history of line upon line, I've already given you the answer to my next question. Okay, the answer's already been given. What is the it for this history? And remember, what is 9/11? Sister Natalie.
Do you want me to answer the question?
No, tell me what waymark that is. 9/11.
You mean like sunray or angel?
No, and no.
Like the
Okay.
planet?
What was 1989?
Tanyan.
No,
The line for line?
no,
Increase in knowledge?
no.
Um,
It's all on the board. No, it's all on the line. There's no word priest anywhere. It's priest.
You say what was it? 1989.
Sister Daisy?
Is it arrival?
Arrival, it's right here. Okay, arrival. Okay, so Sister Natalie, what is 9/11?
What is it? A count or arrival?
You tell me. Not asking you. No.
Arrival?
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay, you haven't just done that by nutrition. So 9/11 is the arrival. Can everybody see how that's working? No, Sister Cedar, you can't see that. You can you see that's the arrival?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to get a pair of scissors. Okay, and I'm going to get this line and I'm going to cut it here. When I cut a line, what do I do? What do I do with the rest of this bit here if I cut it?
It's separate.
So once it's separate, what can you do with it? I had a piece of paper like this, and then I cut it. What can I do with the pieces of paper?
Well, there's two.
I can move them around.
Yeah.
So where do I want to move those lines around to?
Time
Sorry?
to the beginning.
Like this? What did we learn? What did we learn in the first dispensation? It's on the board. What did we learn on the first dispensation? Sister Nazan, what did we learn in the first dispensation?
Arrival.
Line upon line.
We learnt line upon line. So you see here we learnt line upon line. So what we're going to do now?
We're going to do line upon line.
We're going to use it. Okay, so now we're going to use line upon line. So here's, I'll do it this way, sis. We've got one piece of paper, and what we're going to do?
Put it together.
So all together, one piece, what we're going to do?
Put one on top of the other.
First we're going to do what?
Line upon line.
Shout out someone.
Cut it.
We're going to cut it.
Yeah.
Now we've cut it. Now the previous dispensation said do what?
Yeah.
Line upon line. So we're going to get this paper and do what with it?
Put it on top.
Paper upon
Paper.
paper upon paper. Okay, so we're going to put paper upon paper. Okay with that? Okay, so here's 1989, here's 9/11. So there's a history here, which is 9/11. I'm going to cut this, and then we've got 9/11 here. Where's that going to go?
To 2014.
No,
It's going to go on.
underneath and go where?
1989.
It's going to come down here. Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
So this is 9/11. Everybody can see that?
Yeah.
So 9/11 is the arrival. And this way mark is increase of knowledge, formalization, and this is
The arrival. Time of the end. Arrival. No, the empowerment.
empowerment. Okay? Brother Thomas, what date is this?
September 11th.
No. That's September the 11th. Brother Dubray, what date is this? 2014. Can You see that, Brother Thomas?
Yeah, because you've just taken that section and brought it down there. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 2014 is what? Waymark.
The Sunday one. What way mark?
Sister Ola.
Empowerment.
This is the empowerment. It's right here. It's the empowerment. Okay. So 2000 is the empowerment.
Okay.
So 9/11 was an empowerment, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
9/11 was the empowerment of what? The empowerment of what? Don't say first angel.
No. Of the arrival. Of what?
Sister Lizanne?
Of line upon line.
It was the empowerment of line upon line.
Okay. Like you're just
Sorry?
you're taking everything I know and just telling you're still teaching me the same thing, but it's just that you ask me the questions I know, but I can't articulate.
It's fine.
something.
It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
I won't feel embarrassed here. Okay.
No, I'm not embarrassed. I'm just.
So this is the arrival of line upon line.
Mm.
This is the empowerment of line upon line. We okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So 9/11 is not the empowerment. 9/11 is what, Sister Debbie?
Increased one.
No,
Oh, 9/11 increased one.
it's all on the board.
Could you acknowledge?
Sorry?
I was going to say time.
What waymark title?
Waymark. First put 20.
Sorry?
Pound.
No,
20.
no. Oh, Stephen, help her.
What waymark is that?
Arrival.
It's the arrival. There it
Oh,
is.
right, okay, yes,
So
sorry.
9/11 is the arrival of something. So the question is, what is 9/11 the arrival of? And what is 2014 the empowerment of? It must be some kind of message. So there's a message from 9/11 to 2014, just as there was from 1989 to 9/11. There was a message. The message was the message on line upon line. Or history repeats, depending on how you want to understand it. So this dispensation, we want to have some kind of clarity on what the message is, or we could say what the test is. We're being tested upon line. Do we believe that history repeats? And the question here is, we're not being tested if history repeats. We'll use the repeat of history to develop our model to explain things, but that's not what we're being tested on. So the question is, what are we being tested on? I gave you the answer. What are we being tested on, Sister Elaine? Remember.
It's not time.
It's not time or
Time. Went from 9/11 to 2014.
Yeah.
Time. Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So we're being tested on time.
Yeah.
And how many of us know that in 9/11? No one. We don't know it.
No.
How many of us understand we're being tested on increase of knowledge? On line upon line in 1989.
Okay.
So you see that there's going to be an increase of knowledge on the subject of time.
Yeah.
So you're saying from 1989 to 9/11 tested on repeat of history.
Right.
From 1989 to 9/11 tested on repeat of history
Say that again.
or line upon line.
19, yeah.
Yeah. And
Say that again.
from 1989 to 9/11 we're tested on line upon line or repeat of history, and then from 9/11 to 2014 we're tested on time.
Yes.
But when we got
Okay.
Sorry?
The worrying thing is we only started talking about time in 2012, but we're still tested on it.
someone asked before.
Okay, so let's address this issue. Brother Thomas is worried because we only spoke about it quite late. So if you go to the line of Christ and we went to 4 BC, what date would this be, Brother Adelia? Sorry? My sister?
AD 27.
Because she's going to take us to 27.
Yeah.
Do you understand where she's going? No? Give me the events.
Birth,
Birth of. Oh. Birth of. No.
Jesus?
No, Jesus Christ. I don't play games like that. I wouldn't do that unless there was a good reason. Anyone else born in that year?
John?
Okay. So it's the birth of John, and this is
baptism of Christ.
okay. Baptism of Christ. Okay. Tell me what this date is. 27. Tell me what the waymark is or the event. Brother Richard?
Time is fulfilled.
You got. I need a bit more than that. Sister Amanda?
Jesus said that. Yeah,
Not Jesus.
John
Not
preached.
Jesus.
John said it's at the time of Jesus' baptism that the time is fulfilled.
That's. If you want to place that there, that will be there. Sister Lizanne?
John preaching, repent.
John begins preaching here. Okay, so this is how long a period, Brother Thomas?
John started preaching.
6 months. Okay, so he begins to preach, and Jesus is going to be baptized here. So when do you know to get baptized?
When do you know to get baptized?
When are you instructed to repent and get your life in order?
When the kingdom of heaven is at hand?
Which is when?
Just 4 BC.
No,
Um,
John can't speak yet.
no, of course I can't. So when the prophet comes on the scene declaring the
Which is
kingdom.
when?
27.
Here.
Baptism, yeah.
Okay, so but you're worried that we don't pick things up until quite late. They pick up things quite late too.
Yeah, so, well, John baptizing and then
Brother Richard, what waymark is this?
I don't know.
Brother Carl? Formalization of the message. You okay with that, Brother Thomas? Formalization of the message.
yeah.
I don't know what ratio that is, but that's like 5%, less than 5% or something. Right at the end. Okay, so let's come back to this story, if we're okay with that. So, we had 91, 96. What are these dates? So again, we may have a variation of informational reasons behind what we're going to choose. We know this is going to be the increase of knowledge. We've already established that. So, the dates. What is your mark? This one. The increase of knowledge. The subject of time. You don't know?
No, I'm not.
No. Sister Ula?
We're kind of discussing.
I know.
Yeah.
Oh, you can discuss more?
Okay.
You want to discuss more? Put your hand up if you have an idea or an opinion.
So,
Okay, you.
2005.
Okay, so people often put 2005. So I'm going to put 2005 here.
That's when Butler kayak.
And you tell me why you're picking 2005. 2520. So they're picking the 2520. I'm going to put 2520 here.
And the inquiries in time.
So I'm going to put 2520 here, and they picked 2005 because 2005 is essentially when the subject of the 2520 came into this movement. Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay. So you can consult if you're not sure. going to do another line now. Can you see it? You can't see it down here, can you?
I can see it.
Just think, have this lined up with this one. I don't think the camera might not pick it up. I'll put it like this. So I've got the date 1798. Go with that. And I'll put 1840 here. Yeah? So what am I going to put now? 2, good.
Can I say ouch now and somebody else continue?
You can consult. You can consult with your colleague.
Oh, no. 1818,
1818.
it's the increase of knowledge. 1818.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just kind of had a light bulb moment.
And this one?
Formalization.
Okay, so we know it's increase in knowledge and formalisation. We know that. The date?
I don't know. 1833 says fully.
Good. 1833. Okay. So what I want you to do, ask your colleague. What date is this one? You already heard it. 1816. So 1816 is when William Miller begins to study, and 1818 is when we would say he has an increase of knowledge. Or in fact, we could say it in different ways. It's when he takes his studies and begins to formulate in a coherent fashion what those studies mean. Because now in 1818 he's able to predict with precision that in 25 years Christ is about to return. Okay? So all I want to suggest is that 2005 is 1816. So I want to suggest that this is not 2005 this way, Mark. For sure, that's when we begin to deal with the subject, just as 1816 is when he begins to deal with the subject. But it's 1818 that we mark as the increase of knowledge. And we mark 1818, by the way, because of what reason, Sister Natalie? Relation, no, Brother Udile? Why do we mark 1818 as the increase of knowledge?
When you finish the study.
He finishes his study. Anything else?
Did he get his credentials? Deuteronomy 1818?
Okay. Deuteronomy, sorry.
1818.
Deuteronomy 18:18. Have a read. Deuteronomy 18:18. The Lord will bring a prophet to his people. And if you don't listen to what the prophet teaches you, you will die. A life and death message. Tomorrow we're going to move.
Praise the Lord. Good up on that spirit.
Are you there, Sister Amanda? Yeah.
Shall I read it? Yeah.
You've got, yeah. The microphone's just in front of you. We're reading Deuteronomy 18:18. So, as you find in it, 18:18 is when he finishes his study. That's why we mark. That's the increase of knowledge. The knowledge has increased. And read the verse.
Okay, 18:18. I will raise them up a prophet from among their brethren, like unto thee, and will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak unto them all that I shall command him.
Okay. So I want us to remember those words. Is that better? Testing. Okay.
Thank you.
So I want us to remember the words of Deuteronomy 18:18. Carefully. Are we okay with it not being 2005?
Yeah.
Maybe not yet. Maybe we'll give you the date. So, Sister Daisy? The date? You have any ideas?
2009?
Okay, 2009. I'm going to put 2009. And why 2009, Sister Daisy? Microphone first. What I want us to remember is the words of Deuteronomy 18:18. You just give us an answer as she's reading, as she's going to respond.
So that's when there was.
That's not working.
Hello?
Yeah.
So that's when there were a series of studies specifically on the 2520.
So there's a series, a 21-part series done on 2520, where everything that we know about the 2520 as of that date is all collated together and put into a single package. So it begins to be addressed in 2005, but it's in 2009. But everything that we know is all wrapped up in the 2520. So that's why we're going to choose 2009. And also we can tie 2009 to some strong external events. Does anybody know what the external event is besides Sister Natalie? Sister Debray? Sorry? Okay, so you know an awful lot.
Yeah, no, I only know because I can remember.
Good. It's the stock market crash.
Yeah.
It begins in 2008 and it bottoms out in 2009.
Yeah.
And the reason why that becomes a significant issue is we expect an economic collapse before what? Before the Sunday law. And all that tells us that there's going to be an economic collapse. And if you ask economists, they say really since 2008-9, we've not really recovered. They're just patching over the cracks since then. Trying to put everything on an even keel. And it's really not working, even though he had this appearance of functionality and wealth. So we're marking 2009, and the formalization, I guess we all know what that is. It's 2012. Now, the formalization has certain properties to it. When we've already said that this is the testing period of line upon line, and now we're saying this is the testing period of time. Brother Thomas's objection was what? What was your objection?
Like, you're already. That you're already in the time of that testing before.
That wasn't your objection.
No, okay. How comes we didn't know? How comes from 9/11 to 2014? That's the time of test for time, and we only knew about it in 2012.
Okay, so if you remember his question, my question to you is, when you go through a reform line, what do these waymarks, what properties do these waymarks have? And the one I want us to focus on is the formalization. Brother Todd, what properties does the formalization have in a dispensation? What's its nature?
It's where the message is packed up in a way that it can now test the people for the message.
Okay, so Sister Daisy?
Another characteristic which we see in Mennonite history, which is 1833, because his formalization was him getting credentials. So it doesn't only mark the message, but it marks the messenger as well.
Okay, so I'm going to put test. Tested. This is where you're tested, and this is also marks the messenger. It has characteristics about the messenger, as did the increase of knowledge. I want us to remember that. Who's got a mic? Who's got a microphone? So, can you read Deuteronomy 18:18 again? and it's the last part that I want us to focus upon. I think it's the last part.
Our priory.
I will raise them up a prophet from among their brethren, like unto thee, and will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak unto them all that I shall command him.
Okay, so it's that bit there. He's going to speak everything that God has commanded him. And in this history, what is the everything? To 2520. Because in 2009, the series on the 2520 was everything that we currently understood about the 2520. So you can see why 2009 is being used. 2005, we were just beginning to grapple with the 2520 and its significance and how it was working. It took a few more years for us to really have a much comprehensive understanding of that. So 2009 and 2012 is where we're tested. And it's not my purpose to go into the history of 2012, 2014. Sister Tess has done an admirable job doing that, and I think most of us have already heard those presentations. I know the Dutch brethren were there in person listening to it, and I think she may have done it when she came to Wales, first visit. But if it's not, it's available online, and most of us have watched those presentations. So can we see that this history is the test of time? You know, because we know that that's what 2012 was. We had that test and we really essentially did not pass the test properly. So we got to 2014 and this is the empowerment. So what properties does empowerment have? So 2012 is the test, and what's the empowerment? What property does it have, Brother Leon?
Repeat the question, please.
2012, the formalization, it doesn't matter 2000, the formalization, its property is that it's a test. It's when you can test people on what you've been talking about since all the way back here. So people are being tested on what subject?
Time.
Okay, so we would say time, and Brother Thomas said, how comes we didn't know about it before? But it's the 2520 that is the subject of time. So that's what the test was. What is the empowerment, 2014, what's the empowerment? What properties does it have?
Well, the way I see it is, it was through the 2520, time was revealed through the 126.
This is the generic answer, not just for this dispensation. I want to have a property for empowerment, because the formalization is always a test. Whatever the story would be, it would always be the test. That's what it would mean. When I mean the test, someone has been speaking for ages on a subject, and now the movement or the people that that person is speaking to is going to be tested on that issue. So what's the empowerment, that last step?
It's confirmed to be true.
It's confirmed to be true. So now the thing is fulfilled. So we're going to put fulfilled here. Anybody want to make a comment? So now the thing that was spoken about was fulfilled. If you've kept pace with the movement from its inception, that's what we teach, or we used to teach, because we don't do reform lines in a classic way much nowadays. What was 9/11? What was 9/11? Yeah, but in the context of the way we want to understand it.
Confirmation of repeat of history or line upon line.
It was a confirmation that line upon line works, because now you've got two testimonies. That's how we approach 9/11. We think history is repeated, but by 9/11 it's confirmed or fulfilled. So it's the fulfillment. So when we take time in this dispensation, we're using it in exactly the same way, and you can see it meets all the criteria. Everybody okay with that? So if you're okay that this was the time, the test of time, then if we're in this dispensation, okay, for sure we're going to be handling time, but the test is not time. we must have a different test. Can we just see that logic? Yeah? And I guess probably like Brother Thomas is going to say in a moment perhaps, we've only got 5 months, some people are counting days. And Brother Thomas, what's the problem?
No, there's no problem. There's no problem at all.
Okay? Why are we only finding out? Why are we only finding out so late in the day?
I think as we discussed around the dinner table, it's not God's fault. The information was always there. It's when these people wake up. They wake up at the 11th hour. They wake up at the 11th hour.
Okay, I want us to remember something that Sister Daisy told us. What did she tell us? About formalization.
Not only the message is tested, but also the messenger.
So we're tested on the message and we're tested on the messenger. The messenger isn't tested. The messenger becomes the test. Whether or not you'll accept the messenger. Is that what you said, Sister Daisy?
Something like that.
Yeah? You said it a lot better than I did. Okay, so 2014 is what? We're moving on.
Arrival.
Are we with her? Arrival. 2014 is the arrival. Okay? We did that one. 2014 is here. And it's the arrival. Okay? The empowerment. We should all be able to shout out the answer now. Good. Someone said 16? Someone said 18? Yeah.
Oh, and the end, sorry, yeah.
2019. So we've got 2 waymarks. Increase of knowledge and formalization, and then this would be the empowerment. So what are the dates for these two? So these are 16 and 18. Sorry?
You can have 1 week. It doesn't matter.
Okay, so 2018, now we're going to be tested on something. And we're going to be tested on what issues? 2 issues. The message and the messenger. We okay with that? 2016 is what?
Increase of knowledge.
Increase of knowledge. And what do you know when there's an increase of knowledge? Deuteronomy 18:18. What's God doing? Raising up a prophet. So a prophet is being raised up, and in 18, the prophet themselves becomes the test as much as the message that they had given. Everybody okay with that logic? Any questions on that? Okay, so coming back to 15th of June, Arkansas, Lambert Fellowship. There's a presentation that's done on 2 streams of information which seem to be particularly pertinent to that congregation. The reason I say that is because when we talk about 2 streams of information, what does everybody say? CNN and Fox News. Okay, CNN and Fox News becomes 2 streams of information, and people have got tunnel vision on that issue. They say that's all it is. And the reason why that becomes a difficult subject to address is because how many of us in this room are Americans? In fact, I think America probably represents less than 5% of the movement currently. I'm pretty sure it's less than 5. It's 95% of the movement is outside of the United States. So what relevance does Fox News and CNN have for us? Because if you're only looking at it now, you might give it lip service, or or make a token gesture to say, oh, I'll have a look at CNN, and it's a proactive looking at it, you might not even see the difference, you might not even understand the dynamics. So I wanted to make it clear in that presentation that the issue of two streams of information is not just about CNN and Fox News, it's a much deeper and wider issue. And for those of you who didn't watch the presentation, the story in that presentation began in, for those of you who watched it, where did it begin? Where did the presentation begin? Sorry? It began at the time of the end. It went all the way back to 1989, or you could say 1996. It went all the way back to the beginning of the Time of the End magazine, chapter 1, dealing with two streams, the helical and the U-line, which are two streams of information. So this issue of two streams of information is much bigger than CNN and Fox, because those two rivers lead to life and they lead to death. And if you were to read chapter 1 of Time of the End magazine, or you have to watch the presentation, because I read snippets from that chapter, but I do recommend you all read it again. What you see is there are these two stories, and depending upon one's perspective or their worldview, you will have life or death. So the theme for our history, I want to say, is what? Two streams. Two streams of information. That's really what we're now being tested on. Which stream that you accept and which stream that you don't accept. Now, each of those streams obviously are juxtaposed. One is life, one is death. And the information that you need to be grappling with, that you're going to be tested on, has three parts to it. And again, that was identified at the end of that presentation. So for those of you who watched it, so we'll put the information and it's in three parts. And the first one is conspiracies. ACY?
Yes.
So it's conspiracy theories. That's what we're being tested on way back from 2014. But the test comes in 2018. Because people probably never heard of the issue or the idea of conspiracy theories until very recently. So that's number one. The second one is the issue of race. And the third is the issue of gender. Now, what you need to remember, if you forgot already, some people don't even know, is that these are broad brush titles that cover a lot of details underneath them. So you need to think of these as titles. So when we think about race, often we gravitate to colour. But race is, that word race there that's been put there, covers a lot more than just colour. It can deal with tribalism. It can deal with, what's the current hot topic in the news today? A few weeks ago you had elections over about it in Europe, the European elections. What was the hot topic?
Immigration.
Not immigration. Sorry?
Brexit?
Brexit.
Nationalism?
It's nationalism. Brexit, or it's been around for a bit. It's nationalism. So you've got the issue of colour, you've got the issue of tribalism, you've got the issue of nationalism. So don't just think you're not racist. It's a lot more comprehensive or complex than that issue. And then of course the issue of gender and how we deal with gender. And you might ask yourselves, how comes, you might ask like Brother Thomas, this is the first time ever hearing about these things. But you've heard about these things before. Because in 2015, this movement identified that there were problems in the United States. And what was the problem in the United States, Sister Emma, in 2015? Got a microphone? What was the problem in 2015 in the United States?
Marriage.
The issue of marriage. And as soon as we saw that issue being fomented, we realised that there are two institutions that are to be restored at the end of the world. What are the two institutions? Marriage and Sabbath. So we said, yeah, marriage and Sabbath, they're the two. So we knew there was something afoot. And at the same time, what was happening internally in the church? Women's ordination. So all of us are familiar with the history of 2015. So we know that whatever the events that were being identified in that history only 4 short years ago were a component of end-time prophecy. So when I put gender here, we know for 4 years that gender, the issue of gender, is a subject of Bible prophecy that we're now being tested on. Sister Daisy.
Sorry, you know how you explain gender? So just a quick question. Do you know how you gave a bit more of a broad explanation of race and gender? Can you do the same for conspiracy as well, please?
So conspiracy theories, my brother and sister saying InfoWars, it's basically looking at events that are happening in the world and deciding how we explain what we see. Do we give explanations of what we see based upon our own ideas or ideas from extreme groups, or do we take our ideas from the Bible? So I'll give you an example of a conspiracy theory. Strasbourg. Everybody knows the city of Strasbourg in Europe? Yeah?
Yes.
So what country is Strasbourg in?
No, Brussels.
Don't let the Americans hear us. We'll be in trouble. Where is Strasbourg?
France.
Okay, I had a shout, so we'll go with that one. Okay. So Strasbourg is in France. Shame on us Europeans.
Where is London?
So the reason why people think it's Germany because it's right on the border. It's very close to Germany. So why do I talk about Strasbourg? What's the conspiracy in Strasbourg, Brother Tom?
It's the European Parliament building.
It's the European Parliament building. That's the conspiracy. Carry on.
So it's the way it's been made. The architecture resembles an artist's depiction of the Tower of Babel.
Okay, so the way that they constructed the building, it was to deliberately look like the Tower of Babel. So we would teach they're flaunting their agenda so that everyone can see who they are. These evil, wicked this evil, wicked organisation. If you go online access, go and have a look at the pictures. Go onto Google Images and just put Strasbourg building or Strasbourg EU or something. You'll see the building there. So we would see this as an identifier of what? As something evil, and the European nations are all coming together, but there's this problem child called the UK who doesn't want to play ball with the group properly. And we see this as the fulfillment of what?
Prophecy.
Which prophecy? Daniel 2. The iron and the clay won't stick together. So we say, see? And then when you get Brexit and you're a conservative Adventist, you say, amen. Prophecy is being fulfilled. Okay? All of this is conspiracy theory. It's not based upon a proper prophetic model. You can demonstrate clearly now that the purpose of the EU is to defend us, not to hurt us. And how can we demonstrate that? Because what happened in 2016? Tell us. Tell us something else.
I just want to say a different point.
Can you tell us a different point? Tell us something else.
I was just going to say, based on our study of state today, that's why we see it differently now.
Good. So in 2016, what happens in Europe? Okay, what happens in the UK?
Oh, we voted to leave the UK.
Brexit.
Oh, yes, sorry, yeah.
Brexit means what? What does Brexit mean?
Coming out of the UK.
Britain? Exit. Okay. Who's engineering the exiting of Britain from Europe?
We are.
We are?
The people.
Farage.
The people.
Who is?
UK Independence Party.
Farage. And whose pocket is he in?
European, no, not European Union.
Who is in? Who's the first British MP that went to America after in his successful?
No, it was Farage, wasn't it?
Yeah, why?
To have dinner with the
Why? Why him?
because his idea,
Because they're like this together.
Yeah, they
And
have
it's
the
not
same
just his
philosophy.
ideas that are the same.
and I think Trump is demonstrating that with this exorcism from China and all that.
It's because we now have evidence that the mechanism or the tools that were used to allow President Trump to win the elections in the United States were the same tools that were used here in the United Kingdom to allow the Brexiteers to win. And their associate companies. It was a manipulation of data. There's clear evidence to show that. So we know that the fragmentation of the EU is a tool, or the purpose of it is to allow the King of the North, the United States, to rise to power, because we're one of the blocks that are preventing that from happening.
The purpose of Brexit is to allow the King of the
Yes, the breakup of Europe.
Yeah, okay.
The breakup of Europe. And Brexit is the initial or first steps to that.
Yeah.
So to me, that would be an example of conspiracy theories. Another example of conspiracy theories is that there is a global unity. We might call it the globalists, or Davos, or the Masons, or the Illuminati. All of these concepts or ideas of this secret, private, one world government who are all engineering our demise, like the Bill Gates Foundation and their desire to eradicate widespread diseases through vaccination programs. All of these are conspiracy theories. They're all based upon incorrect prophetic models which have led God's people completely astray. So when the real test comes, we are failing those tests, or we find it very difficult to extricate ourselves from them and get onto the right track. Sister Daisy.
Can you give us an example of a conspiracy theory that we've accepted in the movement, please? Whatever time in history.
Does anybody have any thoughts? I don't know off the top of my head.
I didn't know it's on you. Well, I can throw something out. 2001.
9/11.
9/11 was a
She's saying some people in the movement have accepted 9/11 and conspiracy theories. My brother said flat Earth.
So obviously the Strasbourg building was not meant to be like that, but you're just saying that we've interpreted it to be like that.
It's
like
not meant
the
to
Tower
be.
of Babel. We've interpreted it to say that.
No, it was. I think it was designed that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not to resemble the Tower of Babel.
Yeah.
You said that's a conspiracy theory.
I
No,
read the Margaret Thatcher book, and she said Europe was reconstructing Babel, literally in her autobiography. I had that book in 2006. I bought a lot of books. I bought the Papacy one and Margaret Thatcher one.
You have a phone, and there's a language app called
Babel.
Babel. Okay. what does that mean? It's some kind of tool that was designed by Satan? No, they use the word Babel because they recognise that there's a fragmentation of speech or language across the world, and they want to bring it together.
Yeah, but our understanding of Tower of Babel is bad, though, isn't it? But
Wherever our understanding is,
yeah, okay. Oh, they're doing it for a good purpose too.
Yeah.
So is Tower of Babel. But anyway.
I can remember the posters in the 90s. They had the posters from the drawing with the Tower of Babel and then the block-headed people.
yes.
Jean-Marc. Jean-Marc, could you use
And that's church and state as well.
Jean-Marc.
I can remember in the 90s we had posters in the bus, you know, where the buses are driving, in the glass. You had the Tower of Babel, a drawing with upside down pentagrams, and the block-headed people going outside of the Tower of Babel.
So an example of conspiracy theories that the movement has ended into is, and maybe it's not, as I say, something that perhaps is particularly relevant to us, perhaps, is the issue of which stream of information you're going to accept. Is it the version that Fox News has been pumping out for over 23 years now, I think it is, and the information that CNN are offering? The issue of, it's all the issue of apostate Protestantism and right-wing conservatism that the movement has imbibed from most of the top speakers that we've had, because most of them were all American. So their whole perspective is from the perspective of right-wing conservatism, which is apostate Protestantism. And we've imbibed much of that theology. So until very recently, many Americans still held on to the idea that the current presidency was good. And they would believe much of the propaganda that was being promulgated by them. Sorry?
I suppose we did that with Obama on gay marriage, to a degree.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely great.
Sorry? Oh, another one is Hillary Clinton. I suspect many people in this room have reservations about her because they've heard so many stories or lies about her. Paedophile rings and a whole manner of just basically conspiracies, lies. They've been proven to be false reports about her, and yet we would say there's no fire, or so there's no smoke without fire. So they say there must be some semblance of truth there. So we're brought into these very conspiracy theories that are affecting most of the world, the Christian world. So I'm saying the two streams of information is you choose this information or you choose another stream of information, and each stream has these three issues connected to it. You're either on the right side or the wrong side of this argument, and that's what we're currently being tested on. And many of us, under close scrutiny, are finding that we're on the wrong side of the argument, especially when it comes to the issue of, I don't want to say especially on all of these three things. So many of us now probably would say, I'm okay on conspiracy theories, I'm on the right side of that. You may have sort of overcome most of those issues. Maybe there are some more that we have to address that will come up to us, that will be challenged with. There's the issue of race. And remember, it's nationalism, tribalism, as well as skin colour. These issues are not just affecting this movement, by the way, they're affecting the world at large. Everyone's being tested on the same issues. Two streams of information, each stream has these three parts to it. So we're not the only people that are being tested on this. If you see, again, the presentations that have been done, this history here, when you overlay the lines of the Levites and Nethinims, you can clearly see that the Nethinims are now being ploughed by these three pieces of information.
In the past, we used the writings of Avro Manhattan.
Avro Manhattan.
Yeah. Would that
You
also-
used it to do what?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure because he's not, so to speak, not a mainstream source. Would
And
it
you
also-
used it for what? To demonstrate what?
Well, I saw from Brother Tabo, he made a presentation, but he used a book of Avro Manhattan.
I'm asking you, what do you use it to demonstrate what? How nice the Europeans are? How
No.
good the Americans? What was you trying to prove or what was being shown by his work?
Yeah, he made.
I'll help you. Avro Manhattan, his whole objective is to show you how evil and wicked the papal church is.
Yeah.
That's his perspective. That's his mission,
Yeah.
to show you and document how evil the papacy is, and warning you that they're about to come back and do all their wickedness again.
Yeah.
So the question is that a conspiracy theory? Or is it going to be factual? Is it going to be fulfilled in that way? The more you see, the more you know that it is in fact a conspiracy theory. That end-time prophecy doesn't look like that. And most of us have been trained in a dangerously wrong way. With our concepts of what's right and wrong are now being fundamentally challenged.
Yeah.
So the reason why this becomes important, Brother Thomas wanted me to bring this up because the discussions that we've been having, both in the last two presentations that Brother Tom did, and our morning devotions and our conversations over the meal table, are all centered around these issues and our perspective of what's right and wrong. And I don't know if you remember, I think it was in the last presentation when I woke up, I mentioned the issue of these people who stand and keep back or hold back the forces of evil. And if you read how Ellen White portrays them, it says, if we wait for the story of the princes, first of all, they're all princes. Secondly, they've all accepted the Protestant faith. So it's easy to identify that they're on your side. Then she talks about congressmen. So what would we expect to see in the Sunday law where these politicians are holding back or fighting against the evil and the implementation of wrong law? Who would we look to? Because we should be able to identify the names today. The Sunday law is almost ended. The loud cry has already happened. We're well on the way. We're halfway through that loud cry. So we're at the end. We should be able to identify who these politicians are.
Bernie.
Bernie Sanders.
Cortez.
Sorry? Nancy Pelosi. Alexandria Cortez. If you want to know who the politicians are that are standing up for your freedom and liberty, perhaps we should listen to what these people are saying. Because if we really believe we're in this time period, these would be the people that would be standing in our defense. And I think some of us don't even know who we're talking about. And even if you do, you'd think it'd be a waste of time listening to them because they're just left-wing socialists with nothing of interest to say. And I would argue perhaps we've just got the wrong end of things. That we're not looking at the right places to see what the right issues are. Our whole perspective of what is right and what is wrong, what the test is and what the test is not, is being turned inside out and upside down. If you can see the structure of our reform line in this fashion. So let me ask you a question. If we had line upon line, time in 2 streams, and we're at the end of the 2 streams dispensation. What's the next one? Sorry, that's a... Someone said?
I was going to say that was literally the questions right now.
What's this one?
Race, gender.
We're in here, that's what we're dealing with now. Conspiracy, race and gender, that's what we're being tested on. No? Time we were tested on here.
Can't do it again. Sunday law.
Sunday.
Same thing.
State of the dead. As a prediction.
So, what's your question? Ask me.
Sorry, what was it? Sorry, I can't see what the word says at the top of it. Number 2.
Here?
Yeah.
2 streams.
Right, okay.
2 streams of information. That's what our test is. Which stream? We could call it what's your worldview? How do you approach people? What do you think is right and wrong? How would you interact and deal with people of different race, different nationality, different gender? All those issues we're now currently facing and being confronted with.
So we're saying that's nature of man.
How does that affect the movement directly? It should say race, for example. Just personally, I haven't seen.
Well, nationalism affects this movement.
Nationalism?
Nationalism affects this movement directly, does it not?
In what way? I'm not really too sure exactly what nationalism is.
I'm a Jamaican through and through. Patriotic about your country. Is that right?
Americans are terrible.
Is that right?
Say that again, Brother Richard.
The Americans are terrible for it.
The Americans are terrible for it. We should really have a pulse on that. Who's been running and directing this movement for the past 30 years? Not the person, the nation. The Americans are. If you ask Americans, how do you divide the world? They divide the world in 2 parts.
Everybody else.
Essentially, it's America and everyone else is socialistic. Especially if you think about the West. They say everyone just put them into one bucket.
Yeah.
So this issue of nationalism is directly affecting this movement.
So is nationalism patriotism?
Yes. Which is why Brother Tom's series of devotions is so relevant, in my opinion.
Yes, it's happening.
Coming back to my question. So, the question is, what are we going to be tested on in the future dispensation? So let me ask you, the year is 2000 and, no, not the year is 2012. The year is 2000. The year is 2000. Everybody okay where we are?
Millennium.
We're here, 2000. I'm not asking what issue was that. I could have picked another date. I wanna ask us, back in the year 2000, what we're going to be tested on in the next dispensation, and what would the answer have been? We don't know. Okay, let's go to 2013. What we're going to be tested on in the next dispensation? What would he have said?
Sunday.
We would have said Sunday law, and the answer would have been wrong. So now we are on the cusp of the end of this dispensation, entering into the next. And so, upon the test of the 2 things established, what will we be tested upon in the next dispensation? We don't know. We do not have the information. We have enough evidence to know that we will not know until we get into that dispensation. So I want us to keep that idea in mind. Now, we're going to be tested on time. What do we use? What tools do we use in this dispensation? Line upon line. We're going to be tested on 2 streams of information. What tool do we use? Time. We're going to be tested on something. What tools are we going to be using? 2 streams of information. 2 streams of information is conspiracy, race and gender. If you get this wrong here, you will not be able to use these things correctly when you need to use them to pass the test at this time. So we're going to be tested on 2 streams of information. But if you if you ever passed the test of time in the previous dispensation, when time is now going to be used and you're not comfortable using it, it's not going to help you. You're not going to pass the test of two streams. So each dispensation carries a legacy of the past dispensation, but it's not the test. The test is not time. That's why you will have consistently seen from the first moment that the Midnight Cry message was given to us here in 2018, when you tested on two things, the message and the messenger, you see a consistent pattern that the messenger never speaks about this history, never speaks about 2021. It's mentioned, 2020, 2021 are mentioned in a presentation at a very early stage, but it's never the focus. In fact, it's gone quiet. And the reason it's gone quiet is we have to ask ourselves, is God raising up a message and a messenger for his people, giving them direction on what they should do and what the issues are? And if we were to believe that God is doing that work, we should follow their cue. Because if someone in 2000 said, you know what, we need to start getting really focused about time setting, no one would ever have listened to that person, and rightly so.
That's why we have to wait until 2012, even though.
That's why you have to wait, because the testing comes in this history, and you have to wait till the formalization before many of us even realise what the issues are.
And the prophet has to be prepared and ready.
The prophet gets raised up in these two waymarks, remember, increase of knowledge and formalization. So when you come to this one, it's only then that we're going to be using the two streams of information. These three issues here now have to be used if you've successfully passed the test to help us deal with the current testing message. Sister Daisy.
Sorry,
It's the microphone.
just a quick question. So I know you said we can't see what's in the next one, but based upon what we've... Hello? No, it's not.
Keep switching on and off.
No, I do. It's on off. It's on. No, it's on. It's just me that just talking to.
Oh, sorry, my bad.
Yeah, so just a quick question. I know you're speaking about we can't know what's in the next dispensation, but based on what you've mentioned, is it safe to say that we should expect another messenger based on the pattern that you've laid out for the last dispensation?
So it may well be that we're going to have a new messenger that's going to be doing this work. You may well be correct, yes.
Can't we say it for certainty because of the two witnesses at least?
Formalization.
Yeah.
He
Sorry?
What was that point? What were you saying probably into?
Yes, you're saying, is there going to be a new messenger that's going to be raised up to do that work?
Can it be the same messenger?
Sorry?
Can it be the same messenger?
Sister Daisy is suggesting that there was a new messenger here and there's a new messenger here, so there would be new, because the testimony two things established. So yes, that could be. I've tried not to focus upon the messenger because people get a bit touchy about identifying people, even the people themselves get touchy about it.
We don't have a choice, do you?
But the point I wanted to bring up is the fact that we won't know what the testing message is, but we know that if you pass this issue about, if you've got on the right side of these issues, they will be used in this history as tools to successfully navigate your way through it. Sister?
I had a question about what we said earlier about Babylon, of the three errors, and how we related that to Millerite history. And we said that there were three dispensations in Millerite history: time, state of the dead, and Sunday. Are we going to put that on this line? Are we saying that this is time? That's time. Obviously, time is the first one. Are we saying this second one is nature of man because it's to do with race and gender? And does that mean that we can know the third one would be something to do with Sunday, even though this one doesn't really? It's got more than race. It's got more than nature of man. It seems to me. I don't know where conspiracy fits into that. Are we going to put that model on there? Are we going to say we can't do that? 'Cause it doesn't?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we're going to take those lines and use them in that fashion.
Okay.
Because for one thing, we know that if you take the Millerite line up to 63, there is no Sunday law. There would never have been a Sunday law in that history.
No, because that's the second dispensation. It's the third one, isn't it, where the Sunday comes in that model.
Which is what, yeah, but
where the focus becomes Sunday.
But you've got two second advents in that history, so
Yeah.
you can't address it in that simplistic fashion.
No.
Because you're inferring then 63 Christ would never have been able to come back.
Always saying he would have done, but the test looked different. Sunday would never have been the issue.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what you do with that, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you took that argument, there's an argument to be made that we're never even going to have a Sunday law in the way that we think there was going to be as Congress, the law that was passed in Congress in 88.
Yeah.
There's too many things we don't understand. That's why there's not been a focus of attention in this area.
Another question, can I just ask what the link is between time and two streams? I can see more of a link between how we use line upon line to get time and how in the time model we have 2520, which obviously developed into 126, which gave us time. So I can see that clear increase of knowledge on the time, and the link with lines, you have to do line upon line to get that structure. I'm not sure I can see the link between time and two streams. Can you elaborate on that a bit more?
How do you see the link between these two?
Just that we use line upon line to get even that model of putting 2520 on a line and a 126 on a line, just that repeat of history that we thought there should be a 2525.
When you start going into these two streams, if you see the midnight cry message, how much time is being used to construct these models? I mean,
yeah, I'm straining to see the link between that and two streams.
What?
Yeah, because we conceptualize.
No, but time is going to be used to develop 2016, 2018, 2019, to develop all these waymarks.
Yeah.
You need time to do that. And so when you use time and it hits 2016, it hits 2018, you can see that those events are connected to time,
yeah.
and they're all dealing with two streams of information.
Okay.
I don't know any better answer than that,
Okay.
but there's a correlation there.
Can't we say it's cumulative as well? It's not just time that we need for two streams, we need line upon line. It's like combinations of messages.
Of course,
We've got
yes.
that one plus that one plus that one, so we have to have all three now in the next one.
Yes.
You can't do away with line upon line.
No. This is the concern that I and others have about when we start dealing with the numbers in this history. The people, the names that I've mentioned already, have dealt with various dates post 2019, and whether or not those dates are correct or not, I'm not arguing that they're incorrect, but we don't know the events that are associated with them because we don't even know what the test is for that history.
So we don't have a date for those two waymarks, increase of knowledge and formalisation, 2019.
No, I'm saying even if you do,
yeah.
The problem with gravitating to studies or looking at studies that deal with those histories is that we already know that we don't know what the test is for that history. And unless we're dealing with the test now on the issues that we have to deal with and turn our attention to something else, we will end up failing the test. For instance, if we were in this history and I started saying, oh, let's start dealing with the issue of gender, it would have been a distraction from the present truth message. Or in this history, I said I would be teaching, oh, you know what we need to do? It's 1996, time is pressing. We need to predict the date of the Sunday law. But the movement strongly resisted any time setting. Now we have to ask ourselves the question, why did they do that? Was it prejudice? Or was God telling us through those statements not to deal with time because it was not time to do that? And so when people are now saying we're in this history and not to delve into this history, do we say, well, we should, because I have some clues, some ideas about it? Just in the same way here, I'm sure people had clues and ideas about time. And the reason I know that is because Elder Jeff will testify that he resisted time setting in the earlier part of his ministry. He consistently resisted it. So therefore, you know, people were bringing the subject of time up, and he would fight against it, because whether he knows it or not, unwittingly he's saying this is not the time to deal with the subject.
Mike.
Who's got one?
I've got a question.
So my question is, how can you be tested in the harvest?
These lines are much more complex than we give them credence to. If you go to the Great Controversy and you read from chapter 39 into chapter 40, the time of trouble, you'll see that God's people are being tested in that history. Our whole concept is because we have a closed probation, we think we're not going to get tested. We're going to get tested by the death decree. We're going to be tested about our fidelity in that history. If you go to the story of Elijah, I think it's 1 Kings chapter 19, I think, where he gets the death decree imposed upon him at Jezreel, what does he do?
He runs away.
He's being tested. And he fails the test. There are tests in that history. We know that.
So harvest doesn't mean second coming. How you've laid it out there.
Everything that I've put out, I believe to be so. What those waymarks mean, we have to, still work out. We've only begun to realise, or people have begun to accept, that this close of probation is not Michael standing up for his people, and therefore there is no intercession. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean people are sealed now that they're never going to sin again. It doesn't have the properties or the characteristics of Daniel 12:1, but we still call it close of probation.
Yeah, that is a big question. Close of probation, but you're not sealed. Just you can still fail the test, which is hard to conceptualize.
Yeah.
So it's the same principle of in 2012, 2014. When you said the test was in 2012, right? So 2012 we passed the test. Speaking about
many individuals didn't pass the test.
Yeah, but okay, I'll speak to myself. I believe I passed the test in 2012, but we're still here 2019, and then there's this new test that you're referring to. That's the same pattern that you're referring up there in harvest. Yeah.
I've been there for quite a while, I think.
Hour 43.
If there's not any more questions.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry, I tried to make it.
So we're seeing here that in the second dispensation, where we come to the understanding of time, we're being tested on it, we're using line upon line in order to deal with that dispensation. Likewise, in the third, we're using time to deal with that. But my question was more so for thoroughness in my notes. What is the tools that we're using when it comes to the history of the ploughing? Because before then is, a period of darkness. I know there's things that happened prior to that, but what are we actually saying in terms of tools that we're using to grapple with that dispensation?
You need to use William Miller's rules here. You need to understand how proof texting works, but all of them are really done in a kind of a crude way. I don't have all the answers to some of these more probing questions, but that's my understanding, is that essentially Miller's rules are going to be used to understand kind of online. It's probably not a very good answer, I'm afraid. So I did get one question. It says, what will happen on November the 9th? And even though I haven't answered it directly, I think what I've laid out goes at least a long way to answer that question. In some ways, nothing, because 1989 there's an arrival. You don't understand anything about the testing message that's coming, line upon line. 9/11, subject to time we're being tested on. Nothing really happens. We're not aware of what's going on. Same with 2014. Same with 2019. So 2019 here will be the arrival of this message. We won't really have much clue about what's going on. So not much will happen in 2019 at Raffia. But on the other hand, if you look at these events, they're pretty major events across the world. But sometimes the events that are occurring don't tie up in the way, don't tie up with the message in a way that we might think that they should. Sometimes there's a disconnect. So 1989, two superpowers are fighting, okay, so there's a major world event going on, but what has that got to do with the arrival of the first angel's message and line upon line methodology? At 9/11, the towers in New York are bombed. What has that got to do with time setting? There's no, at first thought, there's no real connect to them. 2014, in the Syrian war, ISIS declares itself as a caliphate. A few other things are happening across the world. What's that got to do with two streams of information? So even though major events may occur, they may not directly connect to the testing message itself in the way that we might think that they would. So it's hard to say when you say what will happen November the 9th. The other thing that we'll know is that in this history here, the two streams, we know that time is now going to be used in this history. So if you haven't been studying time properly, you don't know the intricacies of it, when you come to this dispensation and you start applying time, you're going to get into real problems, and essentially you're going to fail that test of two streams because you won't accept what's going on, and people have failed. People are left moving over this issue of time. So if we're not going to grapple with these things and get on the right side of these issues, then come 2019 and onward, we will fail the test. And the problem is we end up failing it without realising it, because the test creeps up upon you, and it'll be. I know we could argue this is a very short amount of time. The time span just keeps on shrinking as we go on. This is 13 years. This is 5 years, and this is 2 years. Time shrinks, so things happen rapidly. But at the beginning stage, I don't think we'll have a clearer realisation of what the test is. Daisy.
So can we really say that 1989, 9/11? Sorry, can we really say that 1989, 9/11, 2014 has got nothing to do with, has no correlation to the test?
No, I'm not saying. I'm saying when you look at it, until you really start thinking about it, afterwards, you could begin to make a correlation. I'm sure you can. But when it's happening, if we were back in 2011, 2001, and we saw that, would we say, oh, the test of time is coming? I don't think we'd see the correlation then. That's what I meant.
But in relation to November 9th, because we mark it as Raffia, are we supposed to see King of the South, King of the Trump, Putin? Are we supposed to see something there?
Okay, yes. So if we see something, I'm not arguing that we won't see something. That may not. It will have a correlation to the test, but it may not be obvious what the test is at that stage. And I'm saying it won't be obvious, just like it wasn't obvious. I mean, unless tell me, how do you see 1989, the fall of the King North, King South, as indicating that we're going to be tested on line upon line?
The reason why I asked about Raffia is because we're given that beforehand, and we have all the kind of players in place. So, because you're saying it probably won't be obvious, but if we're taking the line upon line time two streams, we should be able to decode and see what it is, even though people might say, or even Trump himself might say it's fake news, it didn't really happen, or what's this got to do with Trump and Putin? Shouldn't we be able to kind of read in between the lines?
Before or when? Before or at the time?
At the time, that's the whole point of us predicting it.
So I'm not objecting to the fact that we're going to be a lot better placed to deal with things now than we ever have before. But you can see how time is shrinking, and I want to argue that the tests become harder. Line upon line is pretty conventional. Time setting becomes more problematic. Two streams of information, when we start dealing with these issues, they're really challenging our concept of what's right and wrong. Let me give you an example of that, unless you wanted to make a point. 2015, we have an internal and external event. What are the two events?
Ordination of women.
Ordination of women and same-sex marriage law. Okay? Our identification of the external event was that it meant what? What did that same-sex marriage mean? Right? Image of the beast. So we used a Spirit of Prophecy quote incorrectly to identify that event was the image of the beast, the creation of the image of the beast. If we had thought about it carefully and reasoned from cause to effect, we should have known that it could not be. We should have known that a Democrat cannot introduce the Sunday law. If a Democrat cannot introduce the Sunday law, they could not be creating the image of the beast. If we're okay with that. In fact, the image of the beast began to be created in 2014. The image of the beast is what? Combination? Church and state. What is the state?
Government.
Yeah, no, I don't mean that. What is the state? In real life, what is the state? Which? Donald Trump. This is Donald Trump. What is the church? In real life, what is it? Fox News. So people struggle with that. You can see your faces contorted. Because how does a news outlet become the church? Because Fox News is the voice piece of what? Or whom? The evangelical Christianity. So our whole perspective of what church and state looks like, we don't fully grapple with, we fully don't understand. So when we're back in 2015 and we think, oh, that looks like church and state, it's not church and state that we're seeing. In fact, what we're seeing is an example of correcting people's perspective of what the Constitution looks like. That the Constitution does not define marriage by a man and a woman. It cannot do that. So if we are wrong, and I think we all admit now that we're wrong on the external identification of that event, if we can assent to that event was not the image of the beast, that the work that was being done there was in agreement with the Constitution, not tearing the Constitution down, which is what the image of the beast would really be. If that's the case, and you're wrong on the external, Sister Ula, what would that tell you about the internal? If we're wrong about the external. If you're wrong on one,
Yeah, you're wrong on the other.
we're wrong on the
Yeah,
other.
of
That's
course.
all.
Sorry, I had a clue.
So we're wrong on the internal. What did we say about the internal? We said women's ordination was wrong,
Yes.
and we were wrong. So when you start working out the implications of what these things mean, you begin to see how the test of two streams of information is impacting this movement in a way that is going to challenge us to our very core.
So why are we wrong on women's ordination?
Because we're wrong on the outside. Right, you can't be wrong and right on both of those issues because the issue was the same.
Sounds good.
I think that the churches took
The issue is the same about the role of men and women. That's what the church and the world are being tested on at the same time.
So
That's how we approach the problem. But they're wrong on the outside and they're wrong on the inside.
What would have been the right perspective on that?
What's the right perspective on the external?
It's good.
That is good.
Then what should be our perspective on the internal?
So women ordination.
Just use logic. You know, don't think about all of our pre-information about what we believe right, what we believe to be right and wrong. Just use the logic of that.
But what were they doing that was good?
Who?
the internal.
Tell me what the external were doing that was good.
You're saying that it was good.
You tell me what the external are doing that's good.
They're basically allowing people freedom of conscience and life, and
Why is that good?
because everyone should be able to,
Love who they wanna love.
not so much love who they want, but everyone
Love
should
who
be
they
able.
wanna love. Sorry, Daisy.
No, I was just saying that everyone should be given rights to express how they want to express. Like for us, we want to be able to worship freely.
The problem is, there are men and women involved in this. There's a gender issue, and you're saying what? Externally, with respect to the issue of gender. Marriage is about men and women, conventionally understood.
Yeah.
So tell me how you're addressing this issue with respect to men and women.
Can you ask it a different way?
In the eyes of the Constitution, there is neither
Male or female.
Okay.
But then isn't that what the church is about women ordination? They quote.
I'm not interested in what our perspective was. What should our perspective be? If we're being told externally that there's no difference between men and women, we should say internally our perspective should be.
There's no difference between men and women.
And we said there was. Like we did externally. We said, of course there's a difference between men and women externally, so therefore there must be a difference between men and women internally. We approached the problem correctly. You have to be balanced. You have to come up with the same answer, because it wasn't an accident. You get the same issue being addressed at the same time. We saw an internal and external event at the same time. So it's issues like that that are affecting this movement, just at that one level. There are others.
So there's nothing wrong with women ordination?
Is that a statement or a question?
That's a question.
It's like saying there's nothing.
Who are you
sorry,
asking?
there's nothing wrong with
Ask Sister Daisy, ask Sister Rema.
So there's nothing wrong with women ordination?
I can answer you, sir.
the equivalent is the wrong thing to do.
I think I have an understanding. Yeah, so my thought on this is that maybe we don't really understand, or maybe we have too much of a prejudice against women in that. Because in this movement, women preach, don't they? And women been preaching in this movement and leading out for quite a long time. Yeah? And, but do we see that the same as a priest would? Because what happened? We were comparing the woman ordination to priests in the sanctuary, and said there was never a priest test that holds a position. But we don't really have that setting now. And Ellen White led out with her husband, so, you know, would we have the same discrimination in our time as we're reigning now? That's my take on it.
Is the issue, so is the issue not about women's ordination, but rather the church's right to speak about it, or to address it, or to vote on it?
You tell me what your perspective is. Everyone knows the history. We all know the events. All I'm saying is, this is an issue. This is the issue this is an issue in the Omega. What was the issue in the Alpha of our history? Sound familiar? Brother Tom, sound familiar? Can you name them?
Hazen Foss, William Foy, Ellen White.
And what's Hazen Foss doing? What's he supposed to be doing?
Yeah, he's supposed to be acting as a prophet.
And what does he do?
He rejects it.
Just talks his own nonsense. Conspiracy theory. Sorry?
He doesn't speak at all.
He doesn't speak for God. You can keep silent. I'm just saying, I think I can make a reasonable assertion that he would represent the conspiracy theory person. Because who's a conspiracy theory person today? Who is he? It's Hazen Foss then. Who is it today? President Trump of the United States. Okay? So there's a black man. Was he good or bad?
Obama.
Was he from God?
Yes.
Was he telling the truth?
Yes.
His name is?
Obama.
Obama. Was there a woman?
Yes.
Her name is?
Clinton.
Tess. Hillary Clinton.
Oh.
I don't want to go down that road. There's light in what you said. So there's an issue about these three tests are not just some abstract thought. It's locked into the Millerite history. It's locked into our own history. We have all the clues. It's the test that's confronting this movement. Ellen White challenges all the norms of her generation, a woman prophet.
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton would have been the first leader of the world that's a woman. First time it's ever happened. The de facto leader of this world would have been a woman. Think of the challenges the interesting thought that would have given to us. And her predecessor was a black man, the leader of the world. 10 years ago, before he began to be president, no one would ever have imagined that could ever happen. They changed the norms upside down, inside out. Any thoughts?
So we can technically even have wives as head of the home.
No, I'll clarify. When the husband's not there, the wife's meant to lead out.
Brother Leon.
I've got a different question. So my question is, where did we get 2021 from?
Are we still saying it's 2021?
Different people get them from different directions.
Are we still teaching that's correct? Because I think when you said before we're not focusing on it, I've seen recent presentations, we just call that Panium. I haven't heard anyone say 2021, like you said, for a long time. Or for
We say that I've said, Sister Tess, consistently we'll just call that Panium. She will not put a date on. Not because it's incorrect.
Okay, that's what I'm checking.
It's not because it's incorrect.
No.
Because she wants to make a point.
Yeah.
That
So
the
it's
focus
still
on the
correct.
dates becomes a distraction for the present truth testing message that we now currently have. And it might be okay for the individual, that they may be okay, but we have to remember we're our brother's keeper, and we're leading a movement, and there are people who can get easily distracted by things that aren't present truth testing messages. So it's not. I'm not suggesting that. That's why I put it on. That's why I let the date go on there. It's not. There's no suggestion that the date is wrong. 2020. I'm not saying it's wrong. What I'm saying is the focus on the dates becomes a distraction if we're not careful. Some of us are more distracted than others. Because what we do know is we won't have the details of the testing message, therefore we can't accurately predict what's going on. Plus, if you've watched the recent presentations that are now beginning to come out, our focus is, I'm not going to say shifting, but there is now beginning to be, our attention is now turning to Islam. And as our attention begins to turn to Islam, we all know that the activities of Islam are going to begin to take effect post-2019. And we really do not have any effective tools to analyse the role of Islam at the end of the world. The Acts 27 deals with it, the soft south wind that precedes the hard east wind. We know that. We can see today the role of Islam, how it looks menacing, but it looks different to what it did in 2001. Our understanding of 2001, the way we approached that was, without saying it in a negative way, it was a very basic, rudimentary study on the role of Islam. It was not a comprehensive study. We didn't have the tools. So now we're beginning to look at the role of Islam, and the way we're doing that is using the methodology that we've always used. We now have to go back into Daniel 11 verse 40 to try to understand how Uriah Smith used that verse in connection with the concept or the idea that Christ could have returned in 1863. Because if he had, how many generations would there have been? one generation, not the four. If there's only one generation, you can't have two time at the ends. We'd only have one time at the end in verse 40, which means 1989 would not have existed, which means the way you read the verse has to have changed, because Russia would not have entered into the story in the way that it did for us. So our whole reading of Daniel 11 verse 40 changes as you see the history being portrayed or fulfilled in a different way. And that gives us additional light on the role of Islam at the end of the world. When you begin to see that it's not, I've used the phrase, independent ministries that are working, like Al-Qaeda or ISIS. These are state-sponsored powers. And don't misread that these are the powers that are involved. Things like Egypt, Syria, Turkey, these are nation states. That's what the Millerite history is teaching us about the role of Islam. And if there's any light for us to glean from that history that we could apply in our own, it may fundamentally or radically change the way we approach the story of Islam. We know none of this at the moment. All of this information has to be dug out from inspiration and carefully done. And the other thing is we don't really have the effective tools to do that at the moment. We're only really playing around with parable teaching. We don't have the tools to deal with this history. We don't have the decoding of the information yet. So this is the problem about dealing with the events in that history. It's one thing to get the dates, but it's another thing to actually work out what's going on. And we need to know what's going on because we know time is not going to be our test. It will just be a tool that's being used. We're not being tested on 9 upon 9, but we're using it in this history. Like Sister Emma said, it all comes and projects forward. So we'll be using time in this history to calculate time. In fact, we've already begun to do that. There's not a rejection that work is already begun. But the problem with doing it, it becomes a distraction if you're not careful. Because human beings just want to know, they want to know the answers. And we don't have the proper answers. So it's one thing to say, July 2020, something to do with Islam, without understanding anything about what's going to happen there. It doesn't really help to know the date, because November the 9th this year is not our test. So that we're all clear. Knowing the date is not the test. So if you know it's not the test, you certainly know knowing the dates post 2019 are not the tests either. We need to know the details of the events that are occurring, and there's no way for us to know those things before we get into that dispensation. So I want us to understand the logic and the methodology, the reasoning why Sister Tess, as an example, would never put 2021 on the board, because she wants to have our focus remain in our dispensation, not in the future one. Because as soon as you put 2021, people want to know what the dates for these two are. And that's where it begins to be a distraction if we're not careful, because we all find comfort in dates. We'll close. It's been a long day. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I want to give you praise and thanks for your goodness and mercy. Please help us and direct us into a deeper study and meditation of your word. We thank you, Lord, that you have led us step by step into the present truth. As we begin to grapple with the truths that are confronting this movement, for many of us, these things may have come as a surprise. Please help us, Father, to hear your voice and to not only listen to it, but to follow you wherever you take us. Please bless this encampment for those especially who are being baptized tomorrow. May they spend this evening in prayer and meditation, preparing themselves for the important ordinance of baptism tomorrow. We thank you for all that you do and have done for us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.